Hello muscle car lovers, Ron here. Welcome to Ron's Muscle Car Garage. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Today is part 3 of the 568 build and the information that I want to share with you. And today's information is going to be on bearing clearance for both rods as well as mains. So what I like to see when I'm setting up my engines is I want to see 3 thousandths on both the main bearing and the rod bearing. Now, the rear main bearing, I run that a little bit more. I run that at 4.5 thousandths, but the rest I run at 3. Now, how do I arrive at that? How do I really know that I have 3 thousandths bearing clearance? This is my method. I'm into the math and not Plastigauge. I'll talk a little bit more about Plastigauge after I explain how I size the rods as well as size the bearings for the mains. I first of all mic my crankshaft. Now the crankshaft, I want to make sure that every journal is the same. I have always found them to be very consistent, as I have a great machine shop that does great work. This being said, I still will label each rod bearing in its location to where it goes on a specific rod. Once I've mic'd up the crankshaft journal, I write that down. From there, I take each corresponding rod / piston and I clamp the rod bearing inside of the rod itself with the cap, and then I mic the inner diameter of the bearing inside the rod assembly. From there, I simply do the math. I subtract the crankshaft diameter from the opening in the rod, and the difference is my oil clearance, which should be 3 thousandths of an inch. I find this to be satisfying to me in that I know it's a very accurate check. Main bearings, let's talk about main bearings. Main bearings, once again, all we have to do here is take our main cap, put our bearing in it, put a bearing inside the block, clamp it together. We mic that inside diameter, we write that number down, we go to the crankshaft and we find the corresponding bearing location and we mic the crank and we simply do the math. Once again, we're taking the inner diameter, which is the larger dimension, and we're subtracting the crankshaft journal dimension, which is the lesser dimension, and then we take that difference and that's our bearing clearance. Now with 3 thousandths bearing clearance, I want to add here, what I use is 2050 oil when I have that kind of clearance. And in my particular case, I use Valvoline 2050. Now, from there, let's talk about Plastigauge. Plastigauge to many of you is probably most common and most understood, but I don't like doing it this way. I would rather use the math method. It's just more accurate. It satisfies me in my head that I know I have the proper bearing clearance. Plastigauge, in case you don't know, is a little strip of plastic, and you'll cut little lengths of it. It comes in long lengths, and you can fit that in on the bearing and then clamp everything together and then unclamp it and look at the plastic as it's been squashed, and it'll be a certain width. And on the little paper that this Plastigauge comes in, it's a little sleeve, there'll be increments on there, and you can do a comparison by just holding it next to the squashed Plastigauge that you've clamped into your bearing or into your main or your rod, and then you'll be able to know what that bearing clearance is, supposedly. Once again, I don't trust that. It's fine if it's a passenger car, but for a race engine, I want to be more accurate in my mind that I've got the clearance that I'm trying to achieve. Nothing wrong with Plastigauge. If you're using it, fine, continue. But this is my method and what I've done to set up this 568. So that concludes today's video. I just wanted to touch upon how I size my bearings, which is very simple. It'll just require you to have the proper size micrometers as well as telescope gauges or bore gauges to measure the inside diameter of both the rod or the mains. If you have any questions or comments about this video, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everyone. And like I always say, keep working on them because they're never done.